Do not destroy the means of error correction. Welcome, optimists. I hope you're having a fun day. We want to conserve the means of making progress, which means not putting barriers before us in being able to solve our problems in an open-ended way. This is so we can make the world a better place, rapidly and objectively speaking. The means by which we ensure we do not destroy the means of error correction are structures in what we call society, or a dynamic society, that allow for stability while undergoing rapid change. This stability under rapid change has happened for a sustained period only once in human history, and we are now living through it. Although it began in what is popularly called the Enlightenment never ended. We have continued to improve ever since. It never ceased. We are in the Enlightenment now, having inherited it from the Dutch, the English, and the Scottish. Primarily these were the Enlightenment peoples, from whom it spread out like wildfire across the Anglosphere in Europe and parts of Asia, and at least one place in South America these days, but it is still struggling to be kindled elsewhere. Rather than just critiquing leftists, Marxists, authoritarians, and collectivists of all kind, what positive vision for society can those who oppose such ideologies offer to others who want to escape authoritarian ways of thinking? As many observe, simply criticizing what is wrong with an idea cannot work, especially in persuading anyone they are actually wrong. One must also offer a positive theory of what is better or more beautiful or true. If you won't get it from many anti-authoritarian commentators today, then I'm here to help. What is this positive vision for society? What are we protecting? We want to protect those structures that allow for the identification and rapid correction of errors, and hence the Enlightenment. But specifically, what are those? What mechanisms allow us to protect rapid progress and stability simultaneously? First, we need a tradition of criticism to be upheld. This is, as David Deutsch observes, a most unusual kind of tradition. After all, tradition has meant, traditionally, that which does not change, or that which resists change. But this feature of the Enlightenment, or the Western world, we might almost say it's a defining characteristic, is a tradition of criticism, a tradition of change, explaining what is wanting or flawed and faulty and why, and what is a better idea to jump to. Now, flowing from this principle that might be equivalently stated as the principle of dynamism, the principle that links morality and epistemology together under one system of thought. And that principle is, we must not destroy the means of error correction. So what are societal means of error correction? There are many specifics, but generally they are called reason. And the precondition to reason is criticism, a critical attitude. Error correction must be preceded by error identification. How do we first identify the error we want to correct? Well, we must criticize. This means pointing out the flaw or inconsistency, which means we have to be able to speak about flaws, inconsistencies, falsehoods, and ugliness. We need to be able to voice our criticisms. Perhaps some observation does not match a prediction from an otherwise good explanation. Perhaps from a moral law, absurdity flows. Perhaps we identify some error we want to correct. How does that work? By creating a better idea. And all of that is reason. Reason includes science, mathematics, great art and literature, aesthetics, morality, metaphysics, and philosophy, and more besides. All of these facets of reason need protecting and fostering in a dynamic society. And for those to flourish, institutions that protect the free exchange of ideas which permit progress must likewise be created and improved and therefore protected. Institutions such as democratic governments, which can help resolve conflicts and which enable the removal of rules and rulers without violence. Indeed, that is the defining characteristic of democracy. It is not electing the best rulers, it is being able to remove bad rules once the rules have been made and bad rulers elected. This Karl Popper taught us, but few have noticed the crucial distinction between what democracy is. But democracy is not the only form of error correction we need to conserve. We also want to conserve institutions that protect and maintain free expression or free speech. And of course, we want to conserve free trade. Those three aspects of error correction in a dynamic society, free trade, free expression, and the free vote, are what we want to conserve and what allow for progress. Not inevitable progress, that's prophecy, but the possibility for progress. Because if we take away the vote from the citizen, the right of the citizen to their own life, including the right to speak their mind or their right to trade, we stifle progress. We tend in the direction of stasis. And while progress cannot be guaranteed in an open, dynamic society, ruin and extinction is guaranteed in a closed, static one. This is because for a society to survive, much less thrive, requires solving problems encountered in time, and this means creating the knowledge of how to overcome the disaster. A static society, by definition, is not solving problems. It is not creating knowledge. And so the first existential problem it encounters will destroy it, for it has no means to correct the error. Our positive vision cannot promise that tomorrow will be better than today. That is the mistake of utopians everywhere on the right and the left of the political divide. We can only promise that the opportunity to strive for improving the world will remain in place, because we will try to correct errors. We will be permitted to try, and we're also going to tolerate failure. This is the lesson of the history of our enlightenment, that criticism pointed in the right places at the right times is an engine of progress. We cannot foresee what tomorrow will be like, but it can be better. And there is no limit, besides the laws of physics themselves, on how good things can get, or how fast we can achieve the things we can only dream of today. We can have immortality, or at the very least, a life as long and healthy as you wish. We can have unbounded wealth, spread to everyone. We can have a world of more creativity and adventure, alongside more safety, by which I mean less violence and fewer accidents. We can learn, for example, where all dangerous asteroids and supernovae might be, and how to eliminate car accidents and bacterial and viral infections. Sure, we could populate the stars, but we could also populate more robust bodies with our conscious creative minds. The futures imagined by science fiction authors and screenwriters are often dystopian, but they also offer a glimpse of worlds dominated by people, just as it should be. Any positive vision to be offered up must oppose a multitude of fashionable, pessimistic and nihilistic dystopian obsessions with the end times brought on by climate change, or the takeover of democratic institutions by tyrants, or the loss of the youth to the supposed evils of social media and other technology. But it is not like a positive vision needs to be targeted to each of those manifestations of the underlying anti-humanism directly. A positive vision is a humanist one, or rather a people-centered one. People are knowledge creators and solution generators. We tackle problems to make the world objectively better. More of us are needed, more creativity is needed, because by definition, people are creative, and so more people in the world means more creativity, especially when the people are raised in a dynamic society. That is one which fosters progress because it is based around the tradition of criticism, as I have already mentioned. A tradition of criticism allows us to not ever hold immune from criticism and hence improve any idea. And so our science can improve in lockstep with our technology and our aesthetics and our morality. Our designs, our built environment. And for this to happen, our knowledge of morality will improve our ability to exchange ideas and profit from each other as we provide value for one another in an ever more liberal way. Rapid progress, which is to say more rapid problem solving, is the positive vision we offer up, because we hold each individual person as a beginning of infinity. A person is the unit of explanatory creativity. Teams, communities and societies, and finally entire civilizations, are cooperatives of each of those units of creativity in solving their problems, which contribute to an overall dynamism through a plurality of approaches. And all of this means, even if many more failures occur, more successes tend to happen as well, as we make the mistakes faster than ever before. Making more mistakes more quickly doesn't sound particularly positive, does it? But it is. It means finding out where we are wrong and therefore installing something for some time that is better by our own lights. Now, there is another arm to this positive vision, besides just democracy, speech and capitalism. And this takes me to what we are protecting as a logical consequence of not destroying the means of error correction. And that is people, the most important entities of error correction. Yes, the most important source of error correction are people themselves. We correct errors, we solve problems, we are the universe improving itself and creating faster and better than any other physical process, like evolution or dumb dynamical laws working away on particles in space-time. We people are worth protecting, fostering, and preserving for scientific and epistemological reasons alone. We know there are many anti-human forces these days going under many ideological brands. Environmentalism, degrowth, communism, authoritarianism disguised behind some attractive face. Anyone who denigrates their enemies, for example, as sometimes subhuman, are likewise anti-human. But humans in principle never need to be destroyed. Only their bad ideas do. We want to be an ever more dynamic society. We do not want to have ideas suppressed, either individually within our own minds because of anti-rational memes, or between each other because of coercive psychological or indeed physical forces that act in an anti-critical way. We want to be ever more creative and grow knowledge as a farmer grows crops by tending to new ideas, watering and feeding innovation and pruning our explanations with targeted criticism. We want to pursue happiness and cultivate creativity. As David Deutsch writes in The Beginning of Infinity, quote, "Since static societies cannot exist without effectively extinguishing the growth of knowledge, they cannot allow their members much opportunity to pursue happiness. Ironically, creating knowledge is itself a natural human need and desire, and static societies, however primitive, unnaturally suppress it. From the point of view of every individual in such a society, its creativity suppressing mechanisms are catastrophically harmful. Every static society must leave its members chronically balked in their attempts to achieve anything positive for themselves as people, or indeed anything at all, other than their meme-mandated behaviours. It can only perpetuate itself by suppressing its members' self-expression and breaking their spirits, and its memes are exquisitely adapted to doing this." End quote from David Deutsch in The Beginning of Infinity. Our enlightenment is not perfect. Our dynamic society is not perfectly dynamic. It can never be because we are fallible, and therefore error is inevitable, which is why we need institutions to help maintain our error correction capacity. As Edmund Burke once wrote, quote, "The individual is foolish, but the species is wise," end quote. He wrote that in his reflections on the revolution in France in 1790. Another, perhaps more precise way of saying this is that our institutions and our culture in the West instantiate inexplicit knowledge or wisdom about how society can best maintain rapid progress while remaining stable, and it can do that better than any individual. But we need to be able to criticize all institutions and our own culture in a panopticon way. But criticizing an idea, institution or theory or explanation, existing law or policy is never enough. One needs to be able to offer an alternative idea, somewhere for people to jump to, I say, that is better by their own lights. If one wants to suggest how an entire worldview is pessimistic, or a political ideology or religion or even memeplex is dogmatic or otherwise just flawed, it is not enough to simply point out all the ways in which it is so, which is what we have done here just now. We have offered something that is better than collectivism, authoritarianism, and central planning. What have we said that it entails? Well, following logically from what Karl Popper and David Deutsch write about what it takes an objectively better explanation of the world. This entails, but is not limited to, explaining more while surviving a crucial test that rules against its rivals where they exist. When it comes to philosophy or politics and worldviews, it takes a better explanation of our social circumstance. Fundamentally, as we have said here, we want to make progress. We want to make progress anywhere we need to improve our explanations. To do this, we must identify and correct errors in our existing explanations of any phenomena. To do that, again, we need to protect the means of error correction. So at root, to make progress, to solve our problems, in other words, we need to not destroy the means of error correction. This is what it takes to make progress. This is what it takes, to use the fashionable term of our time in tech circles, to accelerate, to make progress ever faster everywhere. Objective progress, progress that allows us to continue to more rapidly identify and correct errors. So, what are the ways in which we do that? Again, we do it via criticism. The Enlightenment has a tradition, Not a tradition where we enact rituals or do things in the same way, but the opposite. We have a tradition instead of change, rapid change. How? By criticizing stuff which allows us to find the errors and correct them. We have, in other words, a tradition of criticism, as David Deutsch points out. This defines what it is to be a dynamic society. We have that tradition of being governed by rational means rather than ruled almost utterly by anti-rational means that disable our critical faculties. The alternative is a static society governed largely by ideas that keep the status quo in place. To avoid this, and what some get right some of the time, are the derivative or emergent features of this. But they rarely get to the fundamentals, as I've mentioned. The fundamentals being, do not destroy the means of error correction. In a static society or a closed society, in places other than the West, their traditions keep things the same, generation after generation. So their creativity is directed towards that. This is all explained in the beginning of infinity. Creativity exists there, but it is turned against itself. Creativity is like that. It is universal. It can do anything physically possible, including disabling itself or disabling criticism. So again, in summary, we must say, as many do say at the emergent level, protect free speech, errors in what is said, democracy, errors in rules and rule makers, and policies or policymakers or politicians, or leaders and policies as Popper says. Capitalism, correcting errors in the market, in products, services, bosses and employees. Science, correction of errors in explanations of the physical world. Philosophy, correction of errors in meta-theories. Morality, correction of errors in epistemology, in understanding how the world is created and what we should do about it. Mathematics, errors in our understandings of theorems and proofs and necessary knowledge or gaps thereof, and reasoning in general about knowledge broadly. These are all about error correction, and we must protect the means of error correction, or preserve the means of error correction. Do not destroy the means of error correction is a fundamental rule in morality from which all the others flow. We can be fallibilist on that only insofar as it must be the case one day we might be able to improve things. Not that we will, not that we even know what can be changed necessarily, or that we will know what should be changed necessarily. Epistemology is deeper than morality. So fallibilism trumps other moral claims. It means we might be wrong about X, rather than we can know we are wrong about X. Ultimately, our ability to know depends on the laws of physics, or on what we choose to create knowledge about. This is because our capacity to think a thing depends on what the laws of physics allow brains to do. Physics is totalitarian in that regard. If our knowledge of the laws of physics say it cannot be done, then it cannot be done. Until we know better, what else can we say? We can always say, well, our knowledge might be false, so maybe we can exceed the speed of light. Maybe we can violate conservation of energy. Maybe we can think things not possible to think, given the Church-Turing principle. Yeah, sure, all that might be true. All of our knowledge could indeed be false. But we can always say that about anything. Maybe electrons don't actually exist. Maybe cats don't, or people don't. You see, when you go down that road, you embrace relativism. So yeah, sure, the laws of physics may prohibit knowing how we are wrong. Or it could be the case we, or everyone in the cosmos forever, might possibly just always make the choice not to find out how some piece of knowledge is in fact incorrect. But never finding out how some idea is incorrect does not mean we were never wrong about it. There may have been other choices to make, but which never were in the entire multiverse, in all of physical reality. Fallibilism simply means there is the possibility of one day improving things. It does not mean people will one day improve things. Indeed, the idea they will is itself anti-fallibilist. It's possible we'll never find out how to improve a particular thing. We can choose incorrectly. As I allude to, epistemology must be physics ultimately, what can and can't happen in reality, or if preferred, what will happen in reality. In any case, there may be some knowledge never created, for some notion of never. There may be knowledge not possible to create, given a physical law in our way. Problems are soluble unless, after all, there is a physical law that says otherwise. People often forget that unless part because it goes without saying. It's implied, but sometimes we need to make it explicit. When it comes to do not destroy the means of error correction, we could also be fallibilists about it in the way we are about, for example, A equals A, or the law of the excluded middle, which is logically equivalent. Namely, we could always come to a deeper understanding of these laws. Not that we radically change the idea itself, but rather we change our ideas about the idea. This has happened a lot in basic logic and mathematics, for example. So our positive vision begins with protecting our tradition of criticism. These are instantiated in our institutions that protect the means of error correction. This allows for stability under rapid change, or optimism, the idea that things can improve and thus problems are soluble, so all evils are due to a lack of knowledge. Our institutions are in people's minds. That is where they reside. They're not out there in the physical world otherwise. They exist in people who sure build buildings like courthouses and parliamentary buildings, grand monuments to some of these things, sometimes. Although sometimes those same buildings are monuments to their exact opposites, to the opposite, to, for example, a fair legal system or to democracy. So the institutions of democracy, free speech and so on, are in people's minds. Their ideas of what the police are for, what democracy is, what free speech is, what error correction is, we have to do those things and understand those things ever more deeply. That's not relativism, because we can be wrong about any of them, because there always is something to be wrong about. We can make better and worse moves in the intellectual space when it comes to those things objectively. So what do we do to protect those institutions, which are themselves ideas? We continue to focus on wealth and knowledge creation. We seek out new resources as we exploit existing ones. We lower costs, empower the individual, and elevate creativity. We value criticism and skepticism to some extent, beauty and the pursuit of truth, or at the very least, good explanations, especially of the physical world. We understand morality is about solving the problem of what to do next, and that people are universal explainers. The universe is not queerer than we can suppose, but rather it is comprehensible, and by us. And this ability to comprehend is about generating understandings which are within our minds, and by the way, those minds are universal. And understanding is a good explanation. And with knowledge comes control of the environment. That process is unbounded. And in principle, our power can increase without limit to the stars and beyond. There is no settled science and there is no end point to progress. The cosmos is our home and Earth is just the first step. We should want to make it comfortable and affordable for all. Other individuals are valuable as they are sources of solutions and effective error correction, and sometimes reliable collaborators. So we need more people brought up in the Enlightenment tradition. Things have improved and continue to improve, and because people want to solve their problems, we should expect progress to continue. Wealth, health, happiness, and longevity to increase. Again, there are no guarantees except the inevitability of problems and the possibility of solving them. We need to understand democracy as a means of correcting errors, and capitalism as a means of correcting errors, and free speech as another means of correcting errors. But they're all forms of error correction. Therefore, we shouldn't destroy any of them. They are what allows for science to be properly conducted and for us to produce better art and deeper philosophy. We want to protect the capacity also of us people to protect ourselves, which is to say, defend ourselves against the errors that other people make in violating your individual rights. As I say, fundamentally, what we are protecting and what we stand for that other societies do not is the ability to detect and correct errors so we do not destroy the means of error correction. I sound like a broken record, but it's important to drive this home because so many people who want to defend the West or defend the Enlightenment don't understand the fundamental feature of what the Enlightenment is about. Until next time, have fun and stay optimistic.